Today's presentation will discuss the qualities of a good research-grade instrument for your classroom, how to find funding for its purchase, and most importantly, how to use research instruments successfully in the classroom. We will share stories from several institutions, including their successes and their challenges. Our speaker today is Kristen Feast, Product Specialist. Her talk is titled, Bringing Research Instruments into Ecology Classrooms. It's easy with the right strategy. Joining our speaker today are several panelists. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Panelists?
Hi, I'm Shannon Lorio, Senior Application Scientist.
I'm Elizabeth Gordon, Applications Analyst.
Rod Madsen, Product Manager.
Hi, Chris Mancios, National Sales Manager.
Thank you. Remember, our panelists are here to answer your questions throughout the talk, so don't be afraid to submit them as they cross your mind. Also, I will be polling a few of these questions for our speakers to answer live during the talk or immediately following the presentation. So if you don't get an answer right away, please be patient. Okay, I believe Kristen is ready to go. Kristen?
Thanks, Ashley. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining to the webinar. As Ashley introduced, today's webinar is Bringing Research Instruments into Ecology Classrooms. Having talked to several institutions over the last couple of years, I've gathered together a lot of information about what makes an institution successful at finding an instrument and implementing that instrument into the classroom. So today's goal is for me to share some of those insights with you, and I hope you find all of this really helpful. To first give you a brief overview, we all know that giving students the opportunity for hands-on learning is important in the classroom. We want to engage the students in the learning process and get them to ask questions through inquiry-based learning. By combining these together, we can help make students successful in the classroom. Throughout today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing with you some quotes and comments from different institutions that I have pre-recorded, having talked to them about their experiences with either finding funding or bringing the instrument. The first thing I'd like to share with you is a brief clip from Cheryl Kerfield at UCLA. And this clip talks about her experiences with providing her undergraduates with instrumentation and how that changed their perspective on the learning process. So here's Cheryl.
Our students are sequencing DNA, and this is being deposited in the National Center for Biotechnology Information's database and is then useful to researchers worldwide. Making students a part worldwide research community at this level is just very motivating to them. It shows that they, at this level already, can make a contribution. And it is motivating in the sense that the better, they know that the better that they perform, the more that they understand their experiment, and the better that they're able to execute then, the more that they're able to contribute. And I think that that's one thing that's really exciting to them, and it's too often that we sort of present the students in an undergraduate, the undergraduate students, just here to be knowledge consumers. In other words, we give them a lot of information and they memorize it and they eat it up and so on. But here they're becoming knowledge producers as well. And that's a really important new experience for them. And it generates its own excitement and its own motivation.
Today's agenda is pretty simple. First, I'd like to talk to you about instrumentation. What kind of instrumentation you should look for, what features it needs to have or benefits, how to find funding, and how schools have been successful in getting funds to their institution for the instruments. And then finally, implementation. Some best strategies to get the instruments into the hands of your students. With instrumentation, it's really important that you give your students experience with real-world instrumentation. What are scientists and researchers using in the real world? How can you bring that specific instrumentation into your classroom so you're prepared for when they graduate? I remember when I first started college, my dad told me, Kristen, college is to teach you how to learn. And he went on to say that the methods and procedures he learned in college really didn't have much to do with what he was using in the real world. But because he had learned how to learn, that made him more successful. And now I understand that part of college and why that's important to learn how to learn. I also always wondered why experience with the actual methods and with the actual procedures that they're going to use in the real world. Wouldn't that make them better prepared for that transition? Just like we have our students write lab reports or create PowerPoint presentations or learn how to use Excel, those things are important in the real world. And just like we have them learn that and practice those in college so that they can do it in the real world, it's also important that they have experience with the actual instrumentation. It's also important that the instrumentation you bring in is research grade. I can't tell you how many institutions have called me and said they purchased instruments that were low cost or economical for use in the classroom, and then the instruments didn't provide the students what they were looking for. I had one college call me and say they bought 10 low-cost photosynthesis instruments so that the students would be able to use these in the classroom and compare data. But what they found very quickly is the data that these instruments were producing was not accurate enough that they could compare among the data, and they certainly couldn't compare that data with what was being published in the real world. So what they decided to do was to throw out all 10 of those low-cost instruments and buy 1 or 2 truly research-grade instruments so the students could stop focusing on the faults of an instrument and really start focusing on the processes of gas exchange and what they were trying to learn. So it's important that you give your students great instrumentation. It's also really nice if to provide your undergraduates with the opportunity to do poster presentations at conferences or to be a contributor in a paper. And by having that research grade instrumentation, it gives them the advantage of being able to do that because their data is real and it's accurate. Some other things to consider when you're buying instrumentation include the warranty. What kind of warranty comes with this instrumentation? How long does it cover? Also, do you have default values that you can go back to in case students start pushing a couple too many buttons on your instrument? And it's really nice also if you can save your configurations. So let's say you as a teacher are also a researcher, which probably most of you are. You can have your own configuration set on that instrument. Then your students have their configuration set on the instrument. And then you also have your default values that you can go back to if you need to. That available is really important. What about consumables? Do you have a way to pay for consumables in the future or recalibrations? One of the things that LI-COR does with our packages is that, especially for the smaller institutions, we want to make sure that they are going to have everything they need for years and years of use. So we have them everything's purchased upfront in the cost of the instrument, so they don't have to worry about coming up with additional costs 2 years or 3 years down the road for recalibration or something like that. So it's really important to have that maintenance plan in place for how you're going to maintain this instrument. And finally, what about training? A lot of companies with instruments will provide you training initially, but what if that instructor leaves the institution and a new person's hired 2 years down the road? How are they going to learn the instrument? Especially if maybe this isn't their specific field of research, but they're going to be teaching classes that involve this instrumentation to learn this, to gain knowledge. The last thing you want to do when you invest in an instrument is to let it become a doorstop in some lab. Having training in place and having the maintenance of the instrument in place is really going to help you not only get the instrument up and running at the beginning, but to keep it going for years of use and keep it in the hands of your students and upfront for them to use. A couple other quick considerations include applications can the instrument do. Here in the picture, you see a girl with a photosynthesis instrument, but she's doing insect respiration. With another instrument that's used for soil respiration in the other picture, you can see it's hooked up to a series of jars that's measuring gas exchanges oranges decompose. Having lots of applications that the instrument can do is important because that gives you a wider range for other people in your department to use it or even outside of your department. Does the instrument come with educational resources? Will you have lecture notes available? Will you have lab activities available so that as soon as you get that instrument, you can put it to use right away without a lot of work on your part? Will the instrument go where you need it to go? Is it portable? Can you take it out in the field? What about power? Will you have to keep changing batteries throughout the course of a lab? Will there be AC available? How are you going to handle this instrument as you go places? One of the other things to consider is how easy will it be for your students to download data or review it or edit it once they've brought it off of the instrument onto their laptop. Can you easily export all of that data to the web so all students can access it, or will it export easily onto a thumb drive so the student can take it back to their dorm room and plug it into their laptop? How are you going to get that data easily and put it to use for your students? Another thing to consider is how are your students going to be able to edit that data once it is off? One of the features that LI-COR recently added to one of our main educational instruments is the ability to easily edit the data in Excel. Rather than just dumping data into Excel, it's dumping the data and the formulas automatically. This is really nice. Let's say who's been out in the field for 2 hours collecting measurements, and they accidentally set the leaf area at the very beginning to 10 centimeters squared instead of 2 centimeters squared. So they calculated all of this data, they have it in their nice little Excel spreadsheet, and then they realized that the whole time the leaf area was wrong. Now they can go into Excel, simply change that 10 to a 2, and everything else recalculates for them automatically. It's a great feature and it saves a lot of time. One of the other things you could do with instrumentation is leverage the knowledge of others. Talk to other people in your institution. Talk to people at other institutions. Talk to people at the companies that sell these instruments. We deal all day long with what's best for an institution, and we've spent years refining packages, making sure that what you need is going to be there in a package. So calling us and talking to us about, okay, what will I need as a graduate research institution who's doing both teaching and research, or what will I need as a small community college that will be best for my students? Talk to people and leverage that knowledge of others to help you choose what's going to be best for you. One final thing to think about when choosing instrumentation is whether the instrument has the ability to project data. Can you have the instrument set up in a greenhouse or out in the field and have the data being screened in a classroom in front of students, which is a great feature for different classes. What I'm going to do right now is actually have one of our scientists, Shannon Lorio, actually do a demonstration of this feature with one of our instruments. Here's Shannon.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm going to go ahead and switch our screen so we can see the front panel of our LI-6400 portable photosynthesis system. And what you have before you is actually a real-time graph. I have the chamber clamped onto a maize plant in the greenhouse, and I'm actually communicating via Ethernet. So right here in our room, I'm able to control and operate the instrument and also view it from here. You could also have your instrument right next to you with your plant, but this is just a really good demonstration to show how you could use instrumentation like this in a lecture, either for a laboratory or for a seminar, and show students really what the interactions are between the variables they're trying to measure and the variables they're trying to control. So what we're looking at here is our first graph is photosynthesis, and we're just following it over time. So time is our x-axis. Our second graph we are looking at is our stomatal conductance. So that's basically a measure of how open the stoma are, and the stoma control the movement of CO2 into the leaf, the movement of water out of the leaf. So they're obviously very important for the processes of photosynthesis and transpiration. And the last graph we have here is our CI, which is our internal CO2 concentration. This is the concentration at the site of carboxylation. And so it's obviously the driving force for the Calvin cycle, and a very important parameter that we are showing here. And so what you can do is real time is you can change your environmental variables and show what the impacts are to the leaf. And so I'm just going to demonstrate this. I will press my right square bracket, And you'll see how easy it is to toggle between a graphics mode and a digital display, where you can see obviously we have display lines with important variables on it. And here at the bottom we can actually control all of our environmental variables. And one of the things that we're going to do, this leaf used to about 1,000 micromoles of light. And here in Nebraska, grown in the greenhouse in the winter, this is probably about the highest light level it sees. But what I'm going to do is simulate a cloud coming over the leaf. And so I'm going to drop this light intensity, simply go to F5. And here you see quantum flux, and rather than 1,000, I'm just going to dial in 500. So I'm going to drop our light level from 1 per meter squared in second down to 500 micromoles per meter squared per second. And we're going to go back to our graph, and we're going to follow photosynthesis as that change happens. And you can see that this plant, maize, happens to be a very fast responder to changes in light. And you can see here I drop the light and immediately photosynthesis is going down. And if you look at our last graph, our internal CO2 concentration, you can see that at about the same time we see an increase in our internal CO2 concentration. And so that makes sense. If we have a leaf that the light level has dropped, we no longer have the same driving force for the light reactions of photosynthesis, we're no longer producing the same amount of ATP and NADPH to actually drive the Calvin cycle. And what happens then, because our CO2 is not being taken up at the same rate, we see an increase in our internal CO2 concentration, and by this spike. And now, as a feedback control, you can see what's happening with conductance. As our CO2 concentration inside our leaf is building up, that is a signal to the stoma to go ahead and close. And the leaf constantly has to make a decision in terms of conductance between water lost from the leaf and CO2 into the leaf. And if the leaf senses that the CO2 concentration is building up in the leaf, that is a signal to go ahead and close the stoma. See that here in conductance. And eventually this will level out so that the CO2 concentration comes back to its initial level. And we'll see what happens if we go back to our initial light level. We'll go back to our regular display and go back to our setting before, and we'll actually type in 1,000, which was our original light level. And when we return to our screen, we'll see how quickly this particular plant responds to light. And you can see it's actually quite fast. Maize is one of the quicker species to see this in. If you were working in another species, you may not see quite as much of a response and as quick as this is. I'm going to zoom out here so we can see our entire experiment. And here you can see that photosynthesis is almost back to the level it was before. And we see our CI accordingly. When photosynthesis went up, our CI went back down to actually looks like a little bit lower level than it was before, and that's probably because our stoma, the stomatal conductance, you can see, is actually lower than what we started with. So eventually that's going to be a signal to the stoma to go ahead and increase conductance a little bit, and here you can see on the tail end it is starting to increase a little bit. This, either in a lecture or as part of an interactive laboratory, can be very useful in really understanding the processes and how dynamic the system is. For instance, we had 2 graduate students that were here recently for our 6400 XT training that we offer here in Lincoln. And we did this experiment, and both of them had physiology classes, but they had never used the instrument before, and they'd never seen seen all of the parameters displayed like this. And they both said there was a light bulb that went off, and they finally understood what the interactions were between conductance and photosynthesis and CI, and it was just a very rewarding experience to see that. So when you use research quality instrumentation and you're able to do real-time experiments like this in a laboratory or in a lecture solidifies the learning and just it makes it go so much further. So I'll turn it back over to Kristen.
Okay, now you should be seeing my screen again. So hopefully that was helpful to you to see what kind of data can be projected and how that could be beneficial in a classroom. So we've talked about the instrumentation, some things to keep in mind. Now the big question that everybody asks, where in the world am I going to get this money? Well, I would encourage you to be patient. And second of all, I would tell you the money is out there and it's available. Sometimes it takes institutions 4 or 5 years to find the money, but if you stick with it, you try different avenues, be a little creative, you can get the money and you can get this instrumentation. Some institutions are a little bit luckier and they come up with that money very quickly within a year and they've got the instrument. Others, it takes them longer, but stick with it. You can get the money. I always encourage institutions to first go to their own department for support. Go to your department chair, the other people in your department or similar departments at the school that could also possibly use the instrument, and tell them about the power of the instrument, about the different applications it could do. Get them excited about it as well. Then go to your institution and get your institution excited about it. Go to your development officers, your president, other people that will be able to help you at your school and serve as resources. One of the things that LI-COR provides faculty members is a document that describes the power of the instrument. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this up real quick. And you can see here in this letter, it describes a little bit about what a specific instrument can do for the institution. It allows the faculty member to put their own specific details about how they're going to use it. And then a letter that they can then just complete and hand off to other people in their department or other people in their institution as a way to introduce the instrument to them and introduce this, how they're going to incorporate this instrument into the institution. Okay. So certainly don't be afraid to ask companies for something like that to help you, especially if you're not familiar with the instrument, to help you introduce the instrument to other people. Once you have in your faculty, use your resources. There's several websites that can help you find grants, such as grantadvisor.com, grantsnet.org. You can also go to your development officers and ask if they have ideas as to how you might be able to pursue funds. Then there's essentially 2 ways you can go. You can go internal and the external. The internal funds would be like your department funds. Do you have any startup funds available? Maybe check with your president to see if funds that he could provide you. You can also look externally, state, local funds. A lot of customers have gotten funding through trust funds or through different foundations in their region or area. You can also try some of the larger grants like HHMI, NSF, CCLI grants. Those have been really successful for customers. We also have several people who have even gone to their alumni associations and asked for money. I had another institution was in a small town and they went around to the community, to local businesses and said, hey, this is what we want to provide our students and this is why it's going to be great for our town as a recruiting tool to bring new students in to have this kind of instrumentation available and to be a leading innovative school. And local businesses started contributing $100, $200, $500, $1,000, and before they knew it, they had the money they needed for the instrumentation. So there's lots of ways to do this. You just have to be willing to go after it. I have a couple from different people at different institutions about how they were able to achieve the funds. So I'm going to let them tell you what's worked for them, and hopefully this can be helpful to you as well as you pursue funding.
But Buffalo State is, it's a state institution, and we're definitely focused on undergraduate education and providing research experiences for undergraduates. And so when I found out about the LEAF-2 project, I thought that was a great opportunity for me to leverage my startup with money from LI-COR and additional money from the college. And so that's what I did. And so I approached my dean. The dean was very receptive to that. I guess it was a 50-50 split between me and my dean, my startup budget, extra money from the college, and then the contribution from LI-COR that brought the package to Buffalo State.
We started out with the LEAF-2 program by approaching the College of Education. And we started there because we thought if we could get those funds up to about $10,000, we'd be able to urge the Dean of Natural and Social Sciences to at least match that. After getting the College of Education funds, we were able to get about $10,000 from our dean, and then we approached our graduate dean. Next, we went to sponsored programs. After that, we went to our own department, which has some money in operating, and then we used some money from my own program, which I got back through indirect costs. So after we added it all up, it was enough to make the match of the LEAF-2 program.
I'm in the fortunate position where I just started at UC Santa Cruz, and so I have startup money. And they also recently hired another colleague for the plant biology program, so she has startup money. So basically, it's a combination of my startup funds from a colleague. Let's see. Oh, the department contributed twice because they thought that it was an important instrument. And another colleague contributed several thousand. So and then one more thing, I also applied for an internal fellowship from the Center of Teaching Excellence. I'm sure that other institutions have something similar, and they were able to provide $2,000. So it was a lot of hustling, but in the end, I was able to get it all together without it being too much of a hassle for any single person or any single department. And everybody was really happy to contribute and really positive about it. So I think just if you sell the instrument as being really valuable for undergraduate teaching, which is what it's going to be used for, and make it clear that the instrument can be shared among different faculty and that it's a departmental investment, I think people will be happy to contribute. I had no problem. I was surprised, actually, at how generous people were. So,
by the way, you heard several people mention the LEAF program in those interviews. The LEAF program is a program that LI-COR offers for primarily undergraduate institutions, which provides matching funds or significant discounts on instrumentation that's going to be used in the classroom. For more information on that program, you can go to licor.com/LEEF. Okay, so hopefully the stories that you just heard about how these institutions were able to achieve funding for their instrumentation valuable to you as you start pursuing funds for your own instruments. Also, before we go on into implementing the instrumentation, I just want to mention quickly that the document I showed you about gaining support for your department or your institution, at the end of this presentation, I will give you the website where you can access that document if you'd like to see it. So incorporating the instrument, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I'm going to hit on just a couple key you could use that have been successful at other institutions, both large and small. One institution that I speak to quite frequently uses a progressive method. The instruments are incorporated from freshman introductory courses all the way through senior level. At a freshman level, the data is projected on a screen and the class works together. During this time, students get a little better understanding of how the instrument works. They get to see some nice, beautiful light response curves or ACI curves up on the screen where the class can talk about it together and ask questions. As a sophomore level, the instrument is brought into the lab and students start to work with it in large groups and get to know the instrument in more detail. As a junior, they start to work in pairs in different courses using the instrument, taking their own measurements, checking the instrument out, going out into the field and taking measurements. And then finally, as a senior, the goal is that the students are all doing independent research projects, instrumentation to use in that. And then by that point in time, they're really familiar with the ins and outs of this instrument, and they're comfortable checking it out by themselves and going out and taking measurements and analyzing the data themselves. So then it progresses to the point where the students can use the instrument individually. Before we go on to the other methods, just a couple quick things to think about when you're incorporating the instrument. Number one, a lot of institutions have said it's very helpful if you're using the instrument in a lab setting. The instructor is not doing everything together as a class, but students are actually interacting with the instrument themselves, to have either a student that knows the instrument really well, or perhaps a teacher's assistant who can be there that knows the instrument, so that they can stay with the instrument, give students a little brief introduction, help them use the instrument, and then the faculty member doesn't have to, isn't quite so needed at that. They can go ahead and mingle among the rest of the class and make sure everything else is still going, but you've got a student there who knows that instrument well and can help familiar with it and use it quickly and easily and get those measurements done. Another thing to consider would be having students check out a video ahead of time of how to use the instrument. So perhaps before the lab, they have the week before that where they need to come and check out a video, watch the video about setting up the instrument, how the instrument works, basic measurement technique, and analyzing the data, so that when they get to lab, they have a pretty good understanding of how that instrument works, and it smooths out that transition process. And then finally, the other option would be to have the students learn the theory behind the instrument during lecture time or before the lab, where you actually walk through the instrument and how it works, and can walk them through the different screens and show them how to analyze the data together. And all of this kind of depends on how in depth you want the students to go. Do you just want them to get measurements? If so, it's great just to have a student or someone there who knows the instrument, let the other students get their measurements and move on. If you really want the students to understand the instrument itself, maybe it's better to have them check out the video or check out a manual ahead of time, or to go through the theory together as a class, so that they're also understanding how the instrument works, not just the process to which they're measuring. So there's some quick things to consider. Another way to implement the instrument into a classroom is to do a long-term project. I spoke with a college who goes out and they set out long-term soil respiration systems at the very beginning of the semester. So they take their whole class outside together, they set it up as a class, and then through the first couple weeks, the professor displays that data on a screen during the lecture time or during the lab time for students to see the data, and to see what's running as this instrument is going long-term 24/7 out in the field. Then after the first couple weeks, the students check out a survey version of that instrument, and they go measurements in other locations. So each week, a different small group of students goes out and take measurements. And then through the course of the semester, they have this data being collected from the long-term instrument that's running all the time in the field. And they also have these short-term survey measurements that the students have collected. And then they use all of that data together to analyze at the end of the semester, throughout the semester, for different projects and reports. Another strategy is what's referred to as ABC, or also it's called Pick Your Grade. And this is where you actually allow students to choose ahead of time what grade they want on a lab. They either choose an A, a B, or a C, and based on what they choose, that's reflects the amount of work or the amount of engagement that the student has with the project. So your C level would be what your basic requirement would be for a student who leaves your course. What do they have to know? So perhaps this is, maybe they write a lab report where they use data that was collected by the class together. Okay, and that's what you would require as a C. And then those students who choose to do the B level work would write that lab report based on the class data, but they would also incorporate data that's been published that also relates to this topic or to this research goal. And so that would be your B. Or maybe they incorporate 5 papers instead of 2 papers. Depends on what your requirements are. And then at the A level, those students are doing that same report, they're incorporating those same published papers, but they're also now taking the instrument out themselves and incorporating their own measurements and adding their own touch to this. And so you really have this strategy where students can choose, and it puts the responsibility back in the hands of the students as to what their level of engagement is going to be, and it allows those who are pursuing that A, who are probably those school or medical school that are really going to put that extra effort in, who really get to know that instrument, and it also gets your B's and your C's engaged at a different level. So that's another way that you can bring in instruments into the classroom. Another option you could try is working together with other institutions. Dr. Brandon Pratt at California State University, Bakersfield has worked with other institutions in his area, instrumentation among the universities. And so what they do is Dr. Pratt has two of the instruments you see here in the photo, the LI-6400 XT portable photosynthesis system, and then another university has another instrument that's just like it, and then another institution he's working with also has a couple instruments, and so what they do is they get together and they bring all of the instruments to one university, and those students do labs with all of the instruments. So then that way they've got 5 or 6 instruments per lab section, which is really great because students get a lot of hands-on time with the instrument that way. And then the next week they take all of the instruments to the next institution, and the following week they take them to the next institution. And then Dr. Pratt said what they'll also do is to publish all of the data from the different institutions up on a common web page, so that even if the instruments aren't at one specific institution, those students there can do labs virtually based on the data that an institution is gathering. And he said it's been great for the students to work with students at other institutions of different levels, and to also get a lot of hands-on time with the instruments. Some of his students have actually presented at the Ecological Society of America conference, and have even published papers as undergraduates. So there's a lot of exciting work going on there. So we've talked a little bit today about what kind of instrument to pursue, how you can get the funding for it, and then finally just some basic ways to implement the instrument. And there's lots of ways that you can use an instrument, but the important thing is to get creative and to talk to other people and to see what's worked for them and to try some new things and really focus on getting that instrument into the hands of your students, and how can you give them one-on-one time with it to really engage them in this learning process and get them to ask their own questions. I was talking to one gentleman at a university recently, and he said he took our photosynthesis instrument out into a field with a class of 30 students, and he was just going to do some basic sun versus shade measurements and have the students kind of rotate through coming close to the instrument, looking at the screen and writing things down, and then they back up and the next group comes forward. And he said what was really surprising to him is that how excited the students started to get about actually seeing the numbers change when they went from different light levels, from a sun to a shade. And then the students started asking, what if you changed temperature? What if humidity changed? Then what would happen? And he said because he had the instrument there, he could show them in real time, right then when the interest level was high, how things work. And he said the excitement that they had was really contagious. And he said at one point in time, the students actually started applauding the data when they saw the numbers changing on the screen. So there's really exciting things going on in different institutions across the U.S. and around the world as they incorporate different instruments. And I challenge each of you to start implementing more instrumentation into your undergraduate classes. Go find an instrument that's going to reinforce what you're doing in your lab and what you're doing in your courses. Go after the money and then get that instrument and start using it. Get the instrument into the hands of your students. After this webinar, you're going to be redirected to LI-COR's Initiatives for Education webpage, and you can see the address here on the screen. I encourage you to write that down so that friends. But this is a great starting place, regardless of the size of your institution or the instrumentation that you're pursuing. There's some great ideas on this page as to how you can start implementing instrumentation quickly. And then finally, my contact information is also here. I'd be happy to talk with you more about what type of instrumentation might be great for your school, ways that you could get funding or start using the instrument in your class. And then finally, here's this website that I told you I'd be showing you. And this is a place where you can go and download this presentation and also download the document that I showed you about during the funding portion, if you're interested in seeing that in more detail. So I noticed we've had lots of questions coming in, and right now I'd like to turn it over to Ashley and start answering some of those questions for you.
Now we are going to transition into our live question and answer session. Most of you had questions along the way during the presentation, so thank you. If your question isn't addressed during this live Q&A, a panelist has either already gotten back to you or will get back to you as soon as possible. For those of you who haven't submitted your question yet, you can send them to us by expanding the questions panel in the control panel window and typing into the dialog box in the panel, then clicking the send button. All right, Kristen, I've got several questions here. They've been streaming in throughout the whole presentation. The first one I've picked out is from Maria. And Maria asks, what do you recommend for those of us who use the instruments primarily for research?
This is a really common question that we get. For a majority of people at educational institutions, they're doing both teaching and research. So it's really important that they have their instrumentation that they're using for their research. Sometimes they want to incorporate it into the classroom, but they're a little hesitant because they're afraid that, a student may mess up, or that a student may interfere with something or break the instrument, and then they're not going to be able to carry on with the research. I think some things to keep in mind is make sure that the instrument you have is rugged, it's reliable, highly accurate, that it's not going to be easily disturbed. The second thing is to save your configuration and save all of your data on a separate, like on your computer or something like that, so that you can download that back onto your instrument right before you go out and use it. But don't be afraid to let students get their hands on the instrument or to help you with your research in some way. A well-built instrument is not going to be damaged because a student picked it up or used it. It's going to be able to keep doing that research at the same consistent high accuracy level that it was designed for. So I would say, definitely continue to use it in the teaching classroom as well.
Thanks, Kristen. The next question is from Alvin, and he asks, what if a student damages an instrument?
Well, this kind of goes back to what does your warranty cover? And again, here you're looking for an instrument, especially for teaching purposes, that's going to be really rugged and really reliable. I remember when Dr. Pratt, that I was telling you about before, from California State University, Bakersfield, when he was first looking at instrumentation, he called and he said, you know what, I know I have to have the LI-6400 XT because I know it's going to be rugged, it's going to be reliable. To damage it or hurt it, it's going to have accurate measurements. It's not sensitive to getting a little dirt in it or something like that. There's not high maintenance required. If it does get dirt in it, it's user cleanable, so I won't have to send it back to the factory for calibration. Of course, there's those weird cases where a student may severely damage the instrument, but in that case it's similar to if they damaged a laptop that you had let them use. I'm sure your school has policies for things like that, but really when you're looking for the instrumentation, if you get something that's rugged, that's reliable, that's got the high accuracy, you're going to be okay.
Thanks, Kristen. Our next question is from Gabe, and he asks, what kind of educational resources come with the instruments?
Well, with our instruments, we have like the portable photosynthesis system that I've been talking about several times throughout the presentation. It's kind of our premier instrument that's used for education, which is why it keeps coming up. But with that instrument, we have a set of 10 modules that include a variety of topics and applications, and you get like lecture notes that can be easily modified to different levels, whether you're working with graduate students or undergraduate students, freshman or senior level. It also has laboratory activities. It comes with the PowerPoints with several diagrams and photos so that you can incorporate those on your lecture, your own lab activities. And then it even comes with DVDs that show some of these modules being taught in their entirety, so you can actually see what it would look like in a classroom before you have to do it. I think it's important with any instrument that you choose, whether it's a LI-COR or something else, that they do have some sort of educational resources there. Especially if if this isn't your specific field that you've been trained in, you want to make sure that you can take that right to use in the classroom. You don't want to have to go back and try and rewrite all of the curriculum and have to rewrite a bunch of lectures. You need some kind of base to start with to make a really smooth transition.
Thanks, Kristen. Our next question is from Jan and Linda. They must be logged in on the same computer. And these ladies ask, what if the data from our instrument is not projected correctly?
So you saw that what I showed you previously on the screen when I pulled up the instrument that I have here in the room with me, when I pulled that up onto my computer and was showing you the data. If, let's say, you have this projected in your classroom and it's not working, of course, you always have that opportunity to troubleshoot with the students so that they can see how you would fix something like that, and they get to know a little bit more about how the instrument works through that process. And you can say, okay, it looks like we've got a leak, because responding like we would expect it to respond. So what we need to do now is test for leaks. And you can ask the students, why would it be bad if your gasket's not closed tightly around the leaf, or perhaps the light source suddenly went off? How is that going to affect things? And use it for a learning experience for the students. If it's something technical, where suddenly, for whatever reason, you've got it connected through Ethernet and you lose your internet connection, there at that point, you may take and try it the next time. Make sure it gets set up.
Thanks, Kristen. Our next question is from Dirk, and Dirk asks, I just inherited an instrument. It's not a LI-COR instrument, and I'm having some trouble. Can you help?
This is kind of a common question too, and whether it's a LI-COR instrument or not LI-COR, a lot of times faculty member, they start a new position and they walk into this lab and there's some piece of instrument or an instrument, they're not even sure if it's the whole instrument, not really sure what it can do or what it does. We always recommend to contact the manufacturer of the instrument, and it's a great idea to take a digital picture of what you have of that instrument and send it to the company, so then we can tell you, okay, you have this portion but you're missing a certain cable that you might need, or and help you get the instrument completed. And then hopefully that manufacturer is going to have manuals online and training opportunities or training for free that will help you get started on the instrument. If it's an older instrument and you may have to think about, is it working? Is it something I could get working? Or is it better at this point to toss it out and to incorporate something that's, going to be right there, ready to go with all the resources that you need? So there's some things to consider. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Kristen. Our next question is from Paige, and she asks, my school has no money and I've grant options. Now what?
First of all, I'll say I get this a lot. Don't be frustrated if you've tried a couple options and it hasn't worked. I can tell you names of institutions that have tried several different grants for year after year, and they try and they try and they try. And then suddenly they find that right foundation, or they find an area, a local trust fund or something open and they're able to get in and get that grant. But if you're patient, like I said before, if you're patient and you keep trying, that money's out there. You haven't exhausted all your options. Keep going after things and start thinking out of the box. Would it be better if you could get together with a couple other institutions in your local area and together try and come up with an instrument? Would it be possible for you to get a grant if you've said that you'll allow high school students or classes to borrow this instrument or use it during the summertime, something like that. But to think outside of the box, to keep trying new things, but certainly don't give up. And if you contact me, I can try and help you find some things that might work specifically for you and for your own situation.
Thanks, Kristen. Our last question is from Sonia, and she says, our school is starting a new ecology program. What kind of instruments should we be looking for?
It seems with the emphasis now on global climate change, ecology programs are popping up at institutions across the United States and through Canada and around the world. More and more institutions are developing these to give their students the opportunity to major in ecology or to major in something that's going to prepare them for research in global climate change. And some things that I always encourage institutions to get is, again, instrumentation that's going to have a variety of applications. Our photosynthesis instrument is really popular because you can do soil respiration, you can do insect respiration, you can do fluorescence. You have lots of different chambers, whether it's conifers or grasses. to do gas exchange with. I'd also recommend our automated soil CO2 flux system, which can also do atmospheric profiling. It can do long-term and short-term soil respiration measurements. We have an gas analyzers, carbon dioxide, H2O analyzers that can run long-term, in a field. We have a new methane analyzer that a lot of institutions are starting to purchase and use in their classrooms. And then we have like an assortment of light instrumentation as well. It's also important to consider, what's your local ecosystem? What can you do nearby your school? Is there a creek somewhere? Do you have a forest? Do you have a grass, a prairie? Where are your students going to be taking these measurements at? And to start thinking about that as you're thinking about what kind of instruments you should implement that would be most beneficial to your students and to the kind of terrain and environment that you're working with.
I hope everyone's questions have been answered. If by chance you have not received an answer, please stick around. Our panelists are still working on the questions you've submitted. If you'd like to continue your conversation with the panelists, you may do so offline via email or phone. I inform you that an on-demand replay of this presentation will be posted to our website soon. Please watch your email or visit www.LI-COR.com/ENV webinars for more information. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.